This is going to be, I think, a fairly short, a relatively short webinar. I rest assured it will not last an hour, but let's see if we can get all of this in a half hour. Today's topic is transforming member engagement, how MSTA used AI to inspire action. MSTA is Missouri State Teachers Association. I'll get into the introduction to my friends that I have here from Betty and MSTA in just a second. But I think what's really, really cool about this topic today is we're still focused on this overall theme that I have dedicated this stage of my career to, which is personalization and getting people's attention by creating more personalized engagements. And we're doing that today by bringing together two different platforms for MSTA. Now, we formed a personal and a professional relationship with our friends over at Betty. And before I go any further, let me just introduce the friends I have today. I've got Johanna Byrne, who is the COO of Betty. I'll let her explain what Betty is in just a minute. And then we have Kara Potter, who is a longtime client of PropFuels and of Betty's. So they signed on with Betty, I think, a year ago, maybe. They've been working with PropFuel for a number of years. But again, Missouri State Teachers Association, Kara is the digital strategist. And so with that, today we're going to hear about how MSTA used both PropFuel and Betty to create a very specific individualized user or member experience in the area of advocacy. So with that, Kara, can you take us a little bit through what MSTA is all about and tell us about the problem you're trying to solve and how you solved it?
Sure. We are a professional association for teachers in Missouri, and educators, K-12 educators across the state. And like you said, this project was advocacy focused. And so, that's one of our benefits to membership is we're your voice in Jefferson City. And so we had in the past used different tools that acted as kind of a rapid response, one-off tool to engage our members in advocacy issues. If there was a bill that we thought needed a little extra push to get across the finish line or something we wanted to block, we could send out a message to be like, hey, now is the time. Contact your representatives, contact your senators, things like that. We didn't get the use out of it that justified the price tag for it. And so that's when we kind of started exploring like, okay, how can we kind of cobble together something that's going to get us basically there? And then we wound up with something that we liked better.
All right. So the problem you were faced with.
Yes. Well, like I mentioned, so we had this tool. It really just was that single use um, software. And people could sign up and then when we had these alerts, it would send out a text and they could connect, we would put in like a pre-built letter that basically said like, hi, I'm first name. I want you to vote against this bill because of the reasons. Um, so, it was a lot of the same kind of cookie cutter boilerplate messaging that all our members were sending to their legislators when these things went on. And we would use it once or twice a year, maybe. So it was $7,000 a year, and we decided we couldn't really justify that cost for something we were using once or twice a year. We had to have people sign up for it separately, which was a hurdle. And then they weren't necessarily using it when we would send out the information. And then, as I was kind of mentioning before, the content that it sent to the legislators was stuff that we built in, that our advocacy staff wrote. And so, he could maybe put in one or two or three different options, but it still is, if you're on the receiving end of that message, you're getting dozens of the same email with just maybe names and school districts changed.
So this is a very, very specific advocacy problem that MSTA was faced with, and that's what led to the solution with between Betty and PropFuel. I want to make sure that's clear. Is everybody in the audience, if I just see a few yeses, if it's not clear to you what it is we're demonstrating, what we're talking about today, then put that in the chat and we'll offer a little more clarity. We can back up and answer some questions for you. Sometimes I feel as though, Kara, maybe we're too close
Right.
to it to really, I mean, this all makes sense to us. I just want to make sure this makes sense to people who've never seen this problem or this solution before. So I want to make sure you understand the scenario. All right. One other thing I want to note here is in terms of low engagement, the low engagement isn't just a problem with advocacy. It's especially a problem with advocacy. And for advocacy, you really need people to A, tell their story or take a rather uh, a step that tends to require work, right? Like write a letter. And so what you're trying to do here, Kara, is reduce the friction as much as possible and therefore increasing engagement, increasing activity. So with that, let's talk through what you did.
So our first thought was, well, we've got prop fuel. It's got the personalization piece that we can funnel people into their right legislator, like giving them that contact information, and that will probably be good enough. And we said, well, maybe we can tell them, ask Tilly for help. And then we were like, wait a minute, this integration will do it. So Tilly is what our Betty is named, by the way. I'm going to talk about Tilly and just to clear that up. Um, so what we ended up doing was sending out a prop fuel message that gave the basic information of what the legislative issue was that we wanted to address. What the benefits would be if this legislation passed. It was an issue that had to do with Social Security. Without getting too far into the weeds, some Missouri teachers, if they are collecting teacher retirement through that pension program, they cannot access Social Security, even if they worked 20 years something else before they taught. And so it was a small group of our members that were going to benefit from this, but for that group, it was a huge issue. All that is to say. So we sent this out, like explaining that and saying, hey, if you want to send a letter to your senators, we gave them links for their contact forms. Tilly will help you write a message. Do you want Tilly to help? And then through this integration, we were able to write a prompt that filled in their information that we had from Prop Fuel. Hey, I'm Kara Potter. I live in Columbia, Missouri. And this is why I feel this way about the Social Security Fairness Act. Write a letter to my senators. And then the robots did the work, wrote the message, and then they just had to copy and paste it into those forms that were referenced in the emails. Um, that good?
That's good. That's good. All right. So the what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take a minute. I want to tell you a little bit about Prop Fuel for those of you that, and I know many of you are familiar with Prop Fuel, but some of you may not be. And then we're gonna take a minute here a little bit from Johanna about what Betty is. I encourage you to ask questions, and then I'm going to show you the actual engagement in action. I'm going to do a little demonstration of how this went from Prop Fuel into Tilly and then produced an email for people to send to their legislature. So with that, yes, the recording will be shared for your advocacy folks. Um, Yes, perfect. All right, let me tell you a little bit about PropFuel. So PropFuel is a platform that is designed, meaning it's a software platform designed to create a more personalized member experience. And we do that via email, we do that via SMS, and we do that directly on your website, which is a brand new product that we released in Q4 of last year. We do that by asking questions and capturing insight and triggering action. That's the methodology. We call that conversational engagement. This is all about capturing a little bit of insight before you actually try to give people something of relevance. See, the biggest problem I think with engagement is that we're competing for attention. And I've heard this phrase that attention is the new currency. If you can get somebody's attention, engagement is not difficult, especially if you have something that's very, very relevant to them. And so that's why we utilize this conversational engagement approach over email and SMS and directly on your website. Now, that's what PropFuel is. There's campaigns centered around new member onboarding, all the way through to the renewal process and lapsed member win back and everything in between. But imagine when a new member joins your association, rather than just sending them all this stuff that you think they might find valuable, why not ask them what would be valuable to them? Ask them why they joined. And based on why they joined, then maybe you can populate your member profile with more information, but also you can give them stuff that's more relevant to them now and down the road. That's what PropView is all about. With that, Johanna, you want to tell us a little bit about Betty?
Yeah, happy to. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's awesome to see so many of our customers here with us today, and then also lots of new names that hopefully we'll get a chance to meet and engage with soon. So for those of you who don't know Betty, Betty is an AI-powered knowledge assistant. And I love hearing Dave talk about conversational engagement because I think that's exactly why Betty and PropFuel work so well together. Betty is all about conversational engagement with an association's knowledge base. So associations are at the forefront of their industries, their professions, creating knowledge, creating standards, best practices, tons and tons of content for your members and your audience. And a lot of times that content gets lost. It's hard to find as you grow that content base, that knowledge base. It's harder to find what you're looking for, right? So Betty is trained on a curated set of your proprietary content. And then she serves as a conversational interface to that content for your staff, your volunteers, your members, or your wider audience. So again, it's all about that conversational engagement, making your knowledge accessible to your members and your audience, and doing so in a highly personalized way. We like to call Betty kind of your super librarian. It's as if you've brought on this librarian that has this exceptional skill of memorizing every single piece of content in your knowledge base, and then answering questions and serving that content up to your users, again, in that conversational format. So with that, I think we should take a look at the.
Oh, no, no. I have a couple questions for you.
Oh yeah,
One,
go for it.
Johanna, this one of my favorite things about what you've done, what you and the team over there has done is you've taken a a platform, it's just software, and you've given it a bit of character. You've given it some personality. Where did the name Betty come from? It's an awesome acknowledgement. So
Yeah,
tell us where
Betty
Betty came from.
Betty is named after Betty Holberton, who actually just had a birthday last Friday. We got to celebrate Betty's birthday. I'm not sure how old she should have been, which I need to look up. But Betty was kind of on the forefront of computer engineering. She didn't really get recognized. It was around World War One, and so this was kind of our way of giving her the recognition that she deserved. But you're right. We love to infuse personality into our Bettys. Kara mentioned that MSTA's Betty is named Tilly. So a lot of our customers have chosen either a historical figure in their organization, somebody that they want to memorialize or give honor to name their AI assistant after, or have come up with really fun, creative names. I have some examples here of two of our customers, ISA, who named their Betty Mimo. So kind of a gender neutral assistant. Mimo stands for, it's something input, something output. It's terminology in their industry that I don't understand, but makes sense to their audience. And then we have SPARK, which is an acronym for the Safety Professional Assistant and Resource Knowledge Base. So we've had a lot of really creative Bettys kind of enter the world, and it is a fun way to create an extension of your brand, really, to build something that your audience, your members really, grow to recognize and rely on.
Another mutual client of ours, Marine Retailers Association of America. What's the name of theirs?
Theirs is Amy, which stands for AI for Marine Industry Education. Amy was our first ever Betty to enter the wild, as we say. So,
Yeah,
yeah, lots of really great names. Kara, who is Tilly named after?
Tilly is named after Matilda Gex, who was the first woman president of MSTA.
Awesome.
Oh, that's great. This is what I love. See, I'm a lover, man. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I love the technology too. But here's something I always say. I believe that technology, AI, automation, all of this stuff is here to allow us to do the things that are more human. Um, Anita says ours is Percy for Pipeline Research Council International. Um, our Betty is called Elfie, Equipment Leasing and Finance Intelligent Expert. And thank you, Patricia White, who says Betty would have been 108 as of last week. All right. With that, let's see what we got here. I think the next one is basically just saying, here's how it works. Okay. So I'm not used to doing actual demos here. So let's see how this goes. So here we are. This is my email. Don't judge me based on my email here. Kara, I'm curious about something. Generally speaking, we encourage, oh, by the way, this comma is here because normally you put a name in, but this is a test email. You can see a test. I sent myself a test from the platform, so it didn't include that. But anyway, so having said that, Kara, oftentimes in conversational engagement and the methodology, we encourage our clients to just have a little blurb at the top and then jump into the question.
Mhm.
Obviously, you have a scenario here where you have to explain what's going on in the industry. And then, of course, down below, you say if you aren't sure what to put in your message to the senators, you can use Tilly, MSTA's AI-powered tool. Uh, uh, when you're happy with the results, copy and paste it into the contact forms and so on. So it's basically saying, so do you want Tilly to help you write this thing for you? Did you give any thought to what, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Kara. We didn't go through these questions, by the way. I'm just playing podcast Dave right now. But did you give any thought to the amount of content here? Did you think about, maybe we should make this shorter? Because oftentimes shorter intros yields more activity.
I mean, yeah, we typically, this is a longer message than we would usually send, particularly through Prop Fuel, but I think we just wanted to make sure everything was very clear about the ramifications of this legislation and how it could affect either themselves or the people around them.
Yeah, yeah. And acknowledging that in this process, oftentimes there's a trade-off, right? Like that's really important to communicate all of that stuff. Understanding that trade-off is you might lose a percent or two in engagement. Now, let me explain briefly what's happening here, and I'll go back and explain it again at the end. But I'm going to answer this question. I'm going to give it a yes. And what's going to happen in the back end is this is now going through Prop Fuel. It's going to pop up Tilly now. And Johanna, can you explain what's happening now? There's a little bit of a pause. What's
Yeah.
happening in the background?
Absolutely. So you see this little blinking cursor next to the Tilly icon. Tilly's actually taking a minute to think about what the user's after. And this is an intentional pause that we've built in to make sure that Tilly gets it right. So behind the scenes, what Tilly's doing is she's taking that prompt. Dave, if you'll scroll up just a little bit so we can take a look at the prompt that Kara mentioned. So she mentioned in her kind of intro to this problem that they were having to write these kind of cookie cutter, letters that they'd offer to their members if they wanted the support. Instead of having to give Tilly the letter format, all we have to do is give her a little bit of, something to work with. So what we're looking for is an email to our U.S. senators. This is what the email is about. This is what we're urging them to do. And then with that, we also were able to feed in specific data from Prop Fuel uh, specific to the user that had answered that email. So we have Dave's name here. We have where Dave lives to create that more personalized touch in Tilly's response. She is taking that prompt, all of the information that we've given her, and she is building out kind of this expanded context of what the user is actually after, and then using that to deliver a response that actually meets the user's intent. So there's a little bit of pause built in there so that Tilly can take that time to really understand what the user is looking for. And then as a result, we get this really nicely written letter that includes that little bit of personalization to it. Each of those letters is going to be a little different. So Tilly's, one of the things that we work on the back end is something called a temperature score, which allows for creativity in Tilly's messaging. And we allow for that intentionally because we don't want it to be cookie cutter. We don't want it to be a one size fits all. We really want that personalized and custom experience for each user.
Can I add a couple of things too? So
Absolutely.
one thing we felt very confident in what the results would be too, because Tilly was trained on our adopted resolutions. And so Tilly knew why we were for this Social Security Fairness Act, because we had trained her on documentation that said this is what we believe in as an association. Um, and then the second part is too, we went back and forth on, because we don't have in our member database information of like, oh, this person worked for 20 years in the private sector before becoming a teacher. So we don't know necessarily those personal stories. So we went back and forth on having the prompt ask for that first, but we landed on this because we thought it was just pretty impressive to be like, da, 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 here's your letter right away, instead of asking for another question. So you talk about that pause, but really in the scheme of things, it comes out pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that is important to keep in mind is that you can customize that prompt that you feed into your Betty as much as you want. And part of that prompt might have been write a draft letter, but then make sure that you follow up with a question to the user to see if they want to add any additional information. So it's meant to be an iterative process, right? It's meant to be a conversation back and forth in the same way that you would potentially work with a coworker or a friend or whoever to kind of brainstorm and come up with ideas and continue to iterate on each other's work.
So I think one of if I can go up a level here, one of the things that Betty does really well is it creates a really uh, personalized conversation with a member based on all of the knowledge behind your organization. It's like MSTA's smartest member having a conversation with a member. In fact, Kara, didn't you use Tilly to create lesson plans
Mhm.
for teachers as well? Can you
Yeah,
talk about that for 1 second? Then I'm going to jump back into my point.
sure. We have, well, like you said, we've kind of trained Tilly on the Missouri Learning Standards. And so we've kind of shown teachers how they can then use Tilly to build out their lesson plan and include those reference numbers. So if their administrators need them for that documentation, because we know like for a first year teacher, creating the lesson plan on the surface on its own, brilliant. If you're in your 15th year and you've been doing this, you know what your lesson plans are going to be, but maybe you have to turn in something that includes information that just those reference numbers that otherwise you'd have to spend time looking up and adding to your content, until he can just throw those in and make it really quick, and come up with different integrations too with between different subject matters, like find those kind of connection points and help teachers brainstorm the different ideas that they could, maybe integrate art with science and math and language arts, and just kind of all those different pieces.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned the lesson plans because MSTA, maybe more so than any of our other customers, has done a great job of making Tilly a tool that's really actionable, right? So our goal is not just to make knowledge accessible, but to make it dynamic and make it something that we can continue to build on, because that's what associations are offering to their membership. And so being able to take that existing knowledge and turn it into something that's highly valuable in any given moment for your members and actually is creating new knowledge, creating new assets, is what it's all about.
So Betty is an awesome member benefit that lives primarily on your website. Now, the challenge though in that scenario is it lives on your website.
Yep.
And so I've seen some people over email, you can send a broadcast email saying like, hey, check out Tilly. It does really cool things. Go play with it. And sure, that draws some people to use Tilly, but if you can utilize this conversational engagement approach that PropFuel brings to the table, and what works out great for MSTA is they're using PropFuel and they're using Tilly. So now they can really bump up the Tilly engagement by driving people there with a use case through PropFuel. So PropFuel was out over email. It asked this question and it drove 1,295 responses to Tilly, 96% of whom, of course, like why would you say no? And I mean, it's if you're really only going to say yes if you're going to do something with it. But based on the people that said yes, what's happening now through this integration that we made with our friends over at Betty, what's happening now is one of the actions in this campaign, and there's, a dozen or plus actions that you can trigger based on how they answer a particular question. And this one is very, very simple yes or no question. But based on that, there's this action to redirect to Betty. And inside the command for the redirect, you have the prompt that is going to go from Betty. And in the prompt, which you can't see here, but if you were to scroll down through this prompt, it has a token that says incorporate these elements of the member profile, which comes from, Kara, can you remind me, what's your AMS?
Nimble.
Nimble, right. So we pull the profile data from Nimble, we put it into the Betty prompt, and then we hand that over to Betty to do the rest of the work. Now, what's really, really cool about this is you can create an extremely personalized interaction in Betty based on how they answer the question. We know who answered it. We're going to go into the profile Nimble, grab whatever is relevant in that profile, and include that in the prompt so that the engagement with Tilly is really, really hyper personalized. Super, super fun um, integration. Am I missing anything here?
I don't think so.
And Kara, the bill passed because of you.
Yep.
Because of you, MSTA, Betty, and PropFuel, and we made the bill pass. That is great. Are these unique responses if name and address are reported from PropFuel? Are these the only unique for these data points pulled? How effective was it to pass the bill? Okay, so the question is like, what data points did you pull in to make this a unique response? In this scenario, yes, it was just the address and the person's name. I think you could get very, very creative in pulling over any of the member profile data or even how they answered a particular question to create a really super personalized message.
Yeah, it just was kind of the nature of this particular issue where it was at the national level rather than at the state level. And because it involved so many of our retired members, we didn't feel comfortable throwing in like, I teach at such and such building in such and such school district, which we probably would if we were doing a state level advocacy thing with active teachers.
All right, Johanna, can you walk us through this? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so these are insights from our Betty dashboard. So what we're looking at is user engagement data for MSTA's instance of Betty. We're looking at it over a full 365 days. So it is small and there's a lot of data to look at. But I believe MSTA launched their Betty sometime around May of last year, which is when you see that first kind of that initial spike in the, unique users and daily questions.
Yeah.
From there, there's a little bit of a drop off, right? There's going to be initial excitement and then people kind of trickle in and out. And a lot of that is due to the fact that, as Dave said, Tilly lives on the website. She's in a new place. So you have to work hard to get people to go there. But
Let me just interrupt for a second there. That's exactly my point, and I think that's what makes the Betty PropFuel partnership so sweet. Is
Mhm,
these little spikes are oftentimes driven by some form of marketing effort. Now,
mhm.
can I ask, was this the Tilly engagement here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So now instead of just sending out a message saying, "Hey, we got this new toy called Tilly, you want to try it out?" which might be the spike. I don't know, maybe one of them was, I'm sure you got more creative and there were probably some in there around the lesson plans. But when you really start to say there's something in it for you, like there's some real value, this is relevant, this let's do business right now, that's when you start to see a spike. And so that's the beauty of the Prop Fuel Betty connector, which I love so much. Johanna, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
No, no, no. I'm so glad you pointed that out because, yeah, each of these spikes is is going to be some form of, kind of push that MSTA did to get their members using the tool. The numbers look really small on this daily unique users and daily unique questions, but in fact, MSTA has pretty impressive engagement on a day-to-day basis. But you can still see how dramatically these numbers spike when they put the prop fuel integration in place and gave members a very easy access point to the tool and kind of that immediate value back when they clicked yes.
Wow, look at this right here. That's awesome. So I'm assuming this was the question around um, that we're talking about today.
Yeah, so if you go back to the previous slide, I think it was 1,200 participants, and so you'll see that 1,200, yeah, almost
Yep.
1,300 participants. You'll see that number in that, right around that. I think it was around early December, going from just over 1,000 total unique users to 2,300 or so. And so those users, once they're exposed to the tool, they're going to come back and use it again
Hmm.
and see that immediate value. And Kara, I'd love for you to talk about what you found in the demographics of who was actually responding to this question and who was using Tilly and how that might have kind of impacted your overall usage of Tilly otherwise.
Well, yes, because this was an issue that addressed retirement, the demographics of people responding to this question was like 9 years older than our average age of our members. The average age of the people responding was early 50s, and our average age of our members is like mid 40s. So that was also not to stereotype generations, but a group that we would think would maybe be a little more hesitant to try AI. And I will also say it was not the integration helped us make sure that the prompt was good when it was sent over, because if you look on the back end sometime, or like on our Betty analytics, some of the conversations people are trying to start with is like a rough Google search. And so I think exposing people, but then also exposing them with a successful prompt also shows like, oh, I can kind of put in a couple sentences. It's not Google, and kind of getting people to think about things in a different way. But yeah, just being able to expose so many people, and maybe people who otherwise would be a little leery of robots.
Yeah. I think, yeah, prop fuel essentially acts as like a piece of your training, right? Without that push to get into Tilly, you might not have had those users ever explore the tool because of either, I don't know, lack of confidence for AI, or maybe just a lack of understanding of how to use it. And so by using a very simple email interface that they're used to seeing, because this isn't the first campaign you've sent out through prop fuel, you get all of these people that otherwise wouldn't have clicked in to see some immediate value, and like you said, Kara, get some training on how to use it, because these AI assistants do work different from your standard keyword search. So overall, really, yeah, really successful.
I found a lot of association execs having that conversation of do we do AI? Do we want to do AI? Whatever that means to do AI, and how much do we want to embrace AI? And my perspective on that is sure you can incorporate ChatGPT and make your own GPTs, but you're gonna do AI because the partners, your technology partners, are incorporating AI into their platforms. PropFuel has already incorporated a lot of AI functions into our core product. Betty, by default, is a more AI platform than anything else. So you're doing AI. I promise you. Your partners like us are bringing AI to the table for us, for you.
Yeah, and I think what's really exciting for associations is that associations kind of serve as like an influencer for their industry, right? You have the captive engagement of tens, hundreds, potentially thousands of people that work in your field. And so showing that you are on the forefront of using these types of tools, whatever it may be, whether it's Prop Fuel Betty or something else entirely, is really important. And giving people that exposure through your organization to say, this is how you can do it too, I think is really powerful. So
Hey, Kara, the question came in. Are you concerned at all about giving Betty unfettered access to your intellectual property, and how did you overcome that?
Well, most of what Tilly is trained on is stuff that we already have out in the public. And we've talked about tiering our content to have a lockdown version that's more for internal use on our processes and those types of things that maybe to help train staff on. Johanna, you can speak to this better than I can. We have been reassured over and over that that data or that information that we're giving to Betty is just living with Betty, and it's not, a different association would be able to come swipe it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common question we get, and I understand the concern there, right? Your intellectual property is your value, so you have to protect it. Betty is built on an LLM, so it is a tailored version of these models, but we make sure that all of the data that we are feeding into Betty is walled off. So that means it is never going back into the training of the underlying model that we're built on, and it is never crossing between our customers. So we take a lot of measures to make sure that your data is kept very private. And one of the things that I think is important to keep in mind is that people are going out and they're using these AI tools, whether you like it or not. There's ChatGPT and Claude and all of these commercially available and easy to use tools out there. And so if you're not giving them the kind of protected version of your data through a tool like Betty or Tilly, they might be going and feeding that information over into ChatGPT to ask questions about it. So we at least, appreciate the fact that we can provide that access to your information, to your knowledge in a way that is much more protected. Some of our customers are like MSTA, where they're choosing to train Betty on primarily, public facing content. Others and some of the customers that we have on this call today have created a member-only version of their Betty. And Betty will always respect access and authentication rules. So she's never going to feed up content and, allow you to open up a course or, a benchmarking report or anything like that if you don't already have access through your membership or through, a payment. Hopefully that answers the question.
All right. I don't see any other questions in here. The results, I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at this. I'm not sure there's any commentary necessary on this. Kara, anything to, does this slide trigger any thoughts, or is it, do the numbers speak for themselves?
And I think they speak for themselves. I will also
Okay.
say though, so we saved $7,000, but when you think of it, that was just for the advocacy piece that we're able to solve with this integration. We'll be able to use this in other ways. This isn't just an advocacy engagement
Mm-hmm.
situation. We'll be able to point people towards our different professional learning offerings in a really customized way. And we'll be able to share, you know, onboarding information that's more tailored to the individual than we would have before. And so yeah, we saved $7,000 on that advocacy piece, but this isn't just a one. Is it Alton Brown that hates the one tool kitchen tools? This isn't a one use kitchen tool. We can use it for everything.
Yeah, cuts tomatoes too. Have you had any commentary from your members and using the AI assistants?
Like
Like,
if it,
has anybody commented on it? Have you gotten any
I mean,
feedback? Is it
we've
creepy to
got
people, or do they like it?
so if people have found it creepy, they haven't told me. We
Yeah.
have heard from a lot of people. We had one member say like, "Oh, I have it a tab open all the time on my desktop. I love."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And we, every once in a while when you go back and look through some of the conversations in the back end just to see what people are talking about and using it for, like you see some really good use cases where Tilly's able to provide information that, say is saving our members time. I feel like if there's anything as an association that we could give our members, we want to give them more time. And so when you can offer them this tool that's going to make their life easier, it's nice.
Whitney, that's a fantastic question. So Whitney says we don't already have Betty, but they have Prop Fuel. If we decide to go with this integration, do we have to get Betty first, or can we just upgrade our Prop Fuel plan? Awesome question. Like, I've never actually thought about that perspective. We see Betty as our friends and our partner in business. But we don't sell Betty, but that would be interesting to sell an instance of Betty. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that, Johanna. But as for now, nope, you got to go out and buy Betty. You got to go out and buy PropFuel. They're two separate platforms that have that they're like peanut butter and chocolate. They do well together.
Yeah,
But
and
no, two totally different platforms.
it could be interesting to explore a world in which, yeah, Prop Fuel is selling an instance of Betty that's maybe a little bit more generic, but still is able to produce some pretty cool results. Right
Yeah.
now, it's important to have Betty, your own instance of Betty, because as Kara mentioned, some of the work that we didn't show here today was all of the training that we did for Tilly ahead of this Prop Fuel
Hmm.
campaign being sent out. So Tilly had a ton of background context on MSTA, what they do for their members, some of these regulations that they're trying to impact, some of their past advocacy work. So all of that is kind of feeding the context to which Betty's using to, answer the questions of the users in this Prop Fuel campaign.
All right. So what we have here, if you want, you can use your phone on the screen or just go to the chat. If you want to learn more about Prop Fuel, there's a link to talk to our sales team. If you want to know more about Betty, link to talk to their sales team. And then, of course, there's this really well done case study. Thanks to Johanna for driving that and Brittany and our team for working with her on it. There's a cool case study that that we put together on everything we talked about today with the MSTA team. Um, and to Kara's point, there's a lot of use cases for both PropFuel and Betty that go beyond what we discussed today. There's a very, very specific example to demonstrate one singular use case and the integration between PropFuel and Betty. I do not see any other questions. Kara or Johanna, any final comments before we wrap it?
I just dropped my email in the chat. If anybody comes up with questions or thoughts later on, feel free to shoot me an email. Always happy to have a further conversation.
Great idea. I just did the same. All right, guys, thank you very much. Really appreciate you spending the time with us, Johanna and Kara. And thank you to all the people that joined the webinar today. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.